Good morning, gentlemen. I have two gentlemen joining us here in the studios. Honorable Philip Agbese is the Deputy Chairman, House Committee on Media and Public Affairs, and sitting beside him is Eze Onyekwe, who is a legal practitioner and the lead director, Center for Social Justice. Gentlemen, Happy New Year to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Happy New Year, Nigerians.
Thank you. So we'll hope we'll try and adjust your IFB so you can get some clarity on that one. Honorable, I know you already have some feedback concerning the budget that was passed over the weekend from across board Nigerians speaking up about it. Even this morning too, saying different groups now are speaking up saying they're not happy that National Assembly had to jack it up by 1.2 trillion naira. So could you give us a background? What informed that decision?
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to be your first guest for the year. And I believe that is going to change my channels. Now, the issue of budget, I think in the last 72 hours, the National Assembly, particularly the House of Representatives, will receive very serious commendations from highly placed individuals and groups across the country. You know, first, commending our meticulousness in handling the budget. Remember that this the appropriation bill was sent in about a month ago, and we had to do the unusual, you know, suspend plenary for about 21 days. Within this period, we sat even on weekends, and from what happened, you saw, you know, virtually every member was already back home for Christmas. And we had to return back to Abuja, you know, to fulfill our promise. You recall when the appropriation bill was presented to both chambers of the National Assembly, particularly for the Right Honorable Speaker, His Excellency Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas. He said the 2024 budget must meet the earnings and aspirations of the common Nigerian citizen. And in doing that, you know, we took our time to consider a lot of stuff, you know, issues, you know, that are important to the well-being of the average Nigerian citizen. And I think it was, you know, in consonant with that we arrive at some of the differences that we now have today. So when people say we jacked up the budget by 1.2 trillion, I don't think that is exactly the situation. And I will give you a background to that. Remember that when Mr. President presented the appropriation bill to the National Assembly, he pegged dollar at 750 naira. And we looked at the situation. You know, today the dollar is exchanging for 1,300 naira in the open market. So we didn't see any reason, you know, to have that 750 benchmark. And we carried out our consultations. Remember today, the National Assembly, particularly the House of Representatives, we have about 139 committees. And, you know, our various committees were charged, you know, with the sole responsibility of looking at the core issues. You know, it is also our duty as lawmakers, you know, to amend the law. So we were not expected to return the document back to Mr. President as if, you know, it was a switch, a kind of electronic switch where you just put in something and it gives you back like that. You know, as lawmakers, you know, it was our duty to look at it, and that we did. Aside that, we equally, before arriving at some of these considerations, we had meetings with the MDAs. You know, we invited them, and they came. Our various committees sat with them. You know, what Nigerians don't know, the Herculean task of scrutinizing this document. For instance, in the committee, one of the committees where I was privileged to serve, we saw the Nigerian Railway Corporation, you know, making a proposal for 4 million naira for foreign travels. And you and I know very well, because, you know, we want to see the kind of railway system in China, in Egypt, and other parts of the world, but in Nigeria here. And we challenge the MDA. Which part of the world are you going to travel with just 4 million naira?
That's a different field entirely. But let's get Mr. Onyekwe's response to what your thought is about why it was 1.2 trillion naira addition to what was presented. Mr. Onyekwe, do you subscribe to his explanation as to why they had to do that?
Well, evidently, if you had dollar to exchange to the naira officially at 750, and you now move it up by 50 naira to 800 to the dollar, more money will be available. But my own challenge is, what did we do with the additional sum of it's not that they created any new money, because as he rightly pointed out, the value of the naira to the dollar, the I&E window, is not 750, neither is it 800. It's much more than that. So my challenge is that after getting these new sources of funding, I had expected it to be dedicated to more critical areas, like education and health, like cutting down the deficit, because we are still going to borrow over 9-point-something trillion to fund the budget. But what I saw is that, for instance, the National Assembly had an executive proposal of about 190, and they have ended up giving themselves about 334 or thereabout. I don't know the exact figure, but it's not less than 300 and something billion. And of course, such monies should have been properly channeled. And that brings me to something I thought the National Assembly should have looked at. In all our previous romances with removing fuel subsidy, even if it is a little, under Abacha it was removed, and we have PTDF, which the former president superintended over. Under Jonathan, there was Shopee. So you could see this money being earmarked. We could say this is how much we've saved. But under the present regime, what has happened? It was a wholesale removal of the subsidy. And the money was left to float in the bottomless pit called Consolidated Revenue Fund. And there is nothing it has been earmarked for you to track where exactly is this new money we are saving. Rather, we are still borrowing at the same old level we were doing before this so-called windfall came in. And even to make matters worse, between the last time former President Buhari went to the National Assembly to get approval of over 23 or 24 trillion in ways and means, after that approval, we have incurred another 7-point-something trillion in ways and means, which the president just wrote to the National Assembly, and even the former National Assembly we used to call rubber stamp, held some hearings, wasted some time, allowed some commentators to talk about it before approval. But the one that was sent to the Akpabio Senate and this National Assembly, was it on Saturday or whichever day, they simply lifted the gavel and brought it down. No discussion. So it has now become the norm that we borrow, we take money from the CBN against the spirit and letter of Section 38 of the CBN Act and go back and securitize it, which is an anathema to the provisions of the law, because you are permitted to borrow only 5% of last year's actual revenue. Was last year's actual revenue, 2022 actual revenue, was 7.5 trillion, 5% of it, definitely against the law, and you are supposed to pay within a year. And here we are continuing the norm. So that's my challenge. I have no challenge with adding 1.2 trillion, but I have a challenge with what did you do with the additional money?
Honorable Agbasa, how did this elude you? National Assembly.
Yes. You see, when the president came on board, of course, when the 10th Assembly came on board, for the first time, we received a supplementary budget bill consideration. We didn't just take the gavel up, like my brother has said, and hit it. No, we invited stakeholders. We looked at it. It took us a week. But I think time wasting is actually not the issue, because for us, some of us will understand that we're going to be in parliament for just 4 years. And for this period of 4 years, the country has to move. And if we all agree that, yes, we have a lot, of mileage to cover as a country, having deficit in infrastructure, deficit in virtually education, health sector,
if I could just jump in,
all of that.
What is the National Assembly's thinking about ensuring that since the subsidy is removed, where is that money channeled towards, as is given previous examples?
Yeah, before the House of Representatives today, I can confirm to you authoritatively that at the moment we have a bill which has passed second reading, which we call the Infrastructure Commission. We are actually looking at a situation where savings from fuel subsidy removal will be channeled into infrastructure, and we're going to have a commission for that. So that bill is, in the offing.
Is that an executive bill or coming from members?
No. It was, I think, sponsored by the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker Okeze Kalu.
So at the moment, we have nothing whatsoever from the executive on that?
Yes,
no proposal, no suggestions?
Yeah, but Mr. President, when he removed fuel subsidy, first and foremost, we all agree that, yes, there was corruption in that sector and there was a need for the removal of fuel subsidy. We have been dealing with the impact of that, and I think the issue of palliative, redistribution of funds, making additional provision of resources to cater for infrastructure. We, as a parliament, will be looking at those critical issues, especially with the implementation of the 2024 appropriation bill when it's passed into law. But again, let me quickly add, because the current National Assembly, one thing we did when we received the budget document was, first in history, was to hold a town hall meeting, with Nigerians. And our decision wasn't just about, today we have the power, we have been elected by Nigerians to represent them, so we can take absolute decision on their behalf. The House of Representatives, under the leadership of Abakar Bichi's Committee on Appropriation, we did invited Nigerians. We met at the Hilton. The Right Honorable Speaker was there, civil society organizations, I think his group was there, or Center for Social Justice, Equity and Transparency, they were there. And we looked at these issues. And what we have done so far is part of the suggestions that we have received from that town hall meeting. Because people came in and said, we in fact, in considering this budget, let me just tell you, quite a lot went behind the scene. And one of the issues that we looked at is the issue of federal character in terms of distribution of projects across the country. We're very serious about that. And we looked at a situation where in time past, you see budgetary allocations, concentrated in one part of the country, against another geographical location with lesser allocation. We ensure that we have equal distribution of resources. And looking at some of the critical issues today that are very, very germane to our national growth and development, the issue of security. I remember when we invited the Chief of Defense Staff, the Chief of Army Staff, as deputy spokesperson, even not being a member of that committee. Of course, we attend some of these meetings to hear exactly what is taking place between our parliament and those that we have invited. And we looked at some of these details. And, in times without number, I've seen my colleagues, asking the MDAs, what do we do? What are your challenges? Tell us. Because we don't want to leave these challenges behind. We don't want to pretend about the problems. You come with a document before us. You are talking about your personnel costs. And that's why today, we have a budget where the capital expenditure is higher for the first time than the personnel. Because we want to build a new country. We want a country where our citizens are happy. We want a country where we are able, because if you like it or not, the 10th Assembly, till the end of time, our history with the history of the executive is going to be read together. So we don't want an executive that sits down, you present a document to us, we don't know what is going on. And part of that, we're going to be embarking on vigorous oversight activities as soon as they commence the implementation of the 2024 budget.
But if
okay,
I may,
I was just about to ask you a question, but yes, you want to quickly respond.
If I may take a clue, the challenge is not so much about what you've written on the paper called the budget. It is about how you implement it, because I've always maintained that if you look at capital expenditure, for instance, by September for 2023, the MTF told us, and what they presented in the budget speech told us, that they've only done 25% for 2023 at the end of September, October. Now, what happens in real life is that you must pay salaries, otherwise workers will be on strike. Statutory transfers, money to NJC, money to National Assembly, no go area, you must transfer it. Debt service, you must do that, otherwise your rating, which is already on the floor, gets lower. So it's only after you have finished everything, all these things I mentioned, whatever little remains is what you remember to put into CapEx. And that CapEx is divided into two. Even a good part of what we are calling capital expenditure may not qualify to have an impact on the lives of real Nigerians. Because if you are doing a lot of administrative capital, for instance, the vehicles that were bought by members of the National Assembly is capital. When they're building new buildings, office blocks, buying furniture, it's capital expenditure. And most of these things, you import them, and so they don't even impact on the local economy. So in essence, it's not what you've written here that matters. It's how you are going to implement them at the end of the day. I am not saying the executive and the legislature should be at loggerheads. What I'm saying, in essence, is like all these issues that were raised about palliatives. Everybody knows that nobody is getting anything. We should have dedicated that fund, not through a private member's bill or by the speaker or the deputy speaker. It should have been part of the policy framework coming from the executive or even coming from the ruling party, pushed through the executive And of course, you have the majority in the legislature, so that we can earmark and target and say, this money, this is the money you voted for this. We can now say, as members of civil society, we focus and report on them. Otherwise, the way it is now, the money is being frittered away. The deficit is not even reducing. And in fact, from what I read in the media may be wrong, because I've not seen the full budget details, the 8 point something new money that are going to borrow for deficit financing, about 5 point something trillion of it is going to be from the domestic scene. And specifically, they have included ways and means as part of that funding. When we're already having problems with the 24 trillion that was approved, the new 7.5, they're writing it into the budget that even the money they're going to borrow locally, domestically, that a good part of it should come from ways and means. Simply collect money from the central bank, flouting the rules, the law which you made. So that is my challenge about these things. It's not just about general facts and figures. Furthermore, the budget, as I see it, is a continuum between plans and policies and laws. Plans and policies and laws on their own make no meaning until you put the resources down in the budget to implement them. If you have a law, for instance, the gender-based violence law, the VAP law, where you have a situation where it was given to NAPTIP, but there's no budget line for it from the budget office and the National Assembly. So that law is hanging and people are complaining. You don't give an agency a responsibility without resources. So, but I don't see the link between the 8-point agenda of Mr. President or even a national development plan and the current laws. For instance, there are critical things. We have over 20 million children out of school. Where is the line of the vote in the Ministry of Education that says, since Mr. President has a 4-year tenure, let's say we will take 2 million children or 1 million children out a year, and you see that budget line and report on it, reporting for results, so that at the end of the year, we now see whether 500,000 or 600,000 have been removed. We are virtually the poverty capital of the world. We have a lot of our women dying at childbirth, maternal and child health issues. Where is the vote in the health budget we can track and target to say, have we reduced it by 2%, 3% at the end of the year? So, voting massive figures all around and calling them doesn't impress me anymore after having watched the budget for over 20 years. I need dedicated sums I can target for results.
Well, please, let me just quickly chip in here because he mentioned something very important. First and foremost, I'm coming from where he is today. I was in the civil society before going into parliament. And I think in understanding some of these things, from the civil society perspective, it is actually different from realities, from what you see. Because initially, before our seminars and workshops, to understand some of these issues, you cannot find these budget lines that he has mentioned. You can't define them. But I understand that a program like the homeschool feeding program, in schools, it's something that is being done by government to encourage more children, running away from school, encouraging children to equally go to school. That program has some resources already budgeted for it. And in terms of capital expenditure, like I mentioned earlier, the budgetary allocations that have been put in place, are meant to rehabilitate some of these moribund health facilities. So these programs cannot clearly be spelled out in the budget. It's an economic document. It's a financial document. It's not a literature material where you read everything out. But of course, we must give it to Mr. President. One, I always say he's a very lucky president because he has, capable hands that he has been able to appoint into some of these sensitive agencies and ministries. And they are doing their best. We have seen it, in the security sector. We have seen the quality of appointment made so far and the interventions that are being carried out. If you go to the health sector again, so like we will all agree and we will support the government. There's no such like a rubber stamp parliament as far as this current parliament is concerned. We're all there, people from about 8 political parties. Can everybody just move along with the president when you are coming from even the opposition political parties? No, all we want or all we understand today is that there is a national need, for all of us to develop the country. And when you see a president that is serious, about his words, just like the speech he made today, he stated it clearly that I understand the challenges. He even went further to say, I understand that some persons may even be saying, is this how we are going to renew your hope? That is a very sincere president.
All right.
You know, right. So when you see that sincerity of purpose coming from a national leader like Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and you have a National Assembly that is equally ready to support the president.
Ayo's got questions for both of you as well. Go ahead, Ayo.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Let me begin with you, Honorable. One of the things that we heard that would happen in the budget as far back as June last year was that some professional bodies would be, and councils of the agencies will not be receiving federal allocations from the budget anymore. Can you confirm that that has happened? We understand that that will save Nigeria something in the region of 22 or 27 billion naira. Can you confirm that to us?
Yes, based on the proposal given by Mr. President, yes, we of course on our own cannot impute into the budget or make new submissions to them outside what we have done. But again, you know, some Nigerians have raised concerns that some of these organizations are regulatory bodies and there is every need for government to fund the activities. So at the moment, that is what we have done. Going forward, I believe that if the agitation by Nigerians that some of these agencies and councils, you know, should still be funded by the government, if we see it important to do so, of course we are going to do that.
Let me ask the same question from you, Mr. Yekere. What's your take on that? Because one of the issues that a number of people would say will help Nigeria achieve with that is to save some costs from some agencies that should be able to stand on their own feet and by themselves, except agencies that he has also mentioned. For instance, some people are referencing the Financial Reporting Council in Nigeria, that should remain should remain funded by the federal government. But aside that, and a few others like that, what is your take on defunding, some would say, some of these agencies of the federal government?
Well, my take is that there should have been a clear policy position accepted between the executive and the legislature, which will guide the preparation of the budget, and once it is there in the proposal, the legislature should have been able to approve of same. That brings me to the Rosenye Committee report on reducing the cost of governance. Some of these were issues that were raised in that committee, and we had a white paper so many years ago, and nothing has been said after the government white paper in terms of implementation. So I think there is a disconnect between the executive and the legislature. And I think what the executive proposed, that some of these agencies should look for their own money, particularly if they are regulatory agencies charging fees from their members. I don't think it is a bad idea. But what I think should happen is that they should sit down and have a proper government white paper, a policy framework which the executive and the legislature will buy into, and then use it to prepare and approve the budget. Because as at now, it appears they're working at cross purposes, even though the legislature is mainly resolved by persons from the political party of Mr. President. So they should sit down and agree on it.
Well, still with you, Mr. Yekere, you mentioned something the other time about revenue and, you know, the budget and all of that. You said, while you were responding to one of the questions, I think it was Marquez's question you were responding to, that as at September last year, budget performance was something in the region of 25% or thereabout. Do you think there should have been some kind of review of budget performance? Because it would seem like we hardly have that kind of thing. And every year there is these conversations with the members of the National Assembly, with the MDAs, and next thing, you know, they're still getting their budgetary allocations. Do you think, or do you think there was any kind of review of the budget performance of the previous year before this one is signed into law, passed and signed into law by the president? Do you think that will help in any way to fast-track governance?
Yes, I think it is part of the oversight responsibilities of the National Assembly to review the performance of the budget, not just at the end of the year, maybe on a quarterly basis. And then if you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it states that the Budget Office and Minister of Finance have to prepare budget implementation reports, which shows how much has been released and what has been done with the money after the end of every quarter, 1 month after the end of every quarter. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, that duty has been neglected. That if you look at the website of the Budget Office of the Federation, you may find only either the first or second quarter of 2023 there. So we don't have these reports fully there. But what is the challenge for capital expenditure is not so much that money was released to MDAs and they failed to perform. The Budget Office was reporting what they had actually released. So the MDAs were ready to work, but the resources were not made available to them. And so that's why I just gave that narrative that, yes, every other thing had been done as at that time, but capital expenditure had only had 25% release. And that's why I was wondering of the need for a supplementary budget. At a time, you have not even fully implemented the original budget for the year. I thought whatever resources that were available should have been channeled to getting the capital budget of 2023 implemented up to 70 or 80% before we think of a supplement to a budget that has not been implemented.
Okay. Well, Honorable, you want to speak to that yourself because it's something that is definitely of concern to many people that we just passed the budget and no review of sorts. Mr. Onyekwere just referenced the law that we may have been infringing over the years by that.
No, I don't think it's about any law. One of our core responsibilities as a parliament is our oversight function. And I can assure you, in the last 6 months, the current 10th Assembly, we've lived up to that expectation. We've lived up to the billing. Now, when we came on board in June, after our inauguration, in the wisdom of the Right Honorable Speaker, we set up about 30 ad hoc committees to look at issues which pertain to how budgetary allocations have been expended in the past. And after that, the standing committees were constituted, and some of these standing committees have been able to visit the MDAs, investigate some of the projects which are being carried out by the MDAs. And I believe when these MDAs came back, during the budget defense, they equally looked at these issues. So to a large extent, over 90% of the agencies have expended their capital budget allocation for 2023. Because sometimes when these issues are raised concerning the supplementary budget, we equally look at it. Okay, for instance, the supplementary budget for the security agencies, when they came on board, we looked at the issue, the current, because Nigerians will just say, oh, they presented a document to you, you have approved, and no, we look at the issues. In the security sector, some of the procurements that they needed to do prior to that time had to be done in dollars, and they needed more money. So they brought this document before us, and again, it is also very important, and it's something we as a parliament will do as a matter of fact. In fact, in line with the Speaker's legislative agenda, we want to see a situation where, these monies are released on timely basis, and these funds are also, used for the purposes which they are meant for. Because you cannot promise to construct a road within a period of 18 months.
Honorable, pardon me for jumping in.
Contractors are not on site.
Pardon me for jumping in, Honorable. If Nigerians, feel like the openness is not significant enough, I think it's only understandable for them to ask these questions. Consequently, of course, we will expect you to respond to what the Honorable has said, whether you are or not you're persuaded about the scrutiny of the 2023 budget before this one was passed. But let me come back to you, Mr. Onyekwere. You mentioned something the other time about out-of-school children. And I think a number of people would say that that is one of the issues that should be addressed by the states. The federal government, of course, the president in his speech also mentioned the issue of collaborating with states. The budget of the federal government may be significant, but how significant is it compared to the budget of the states? Because it seems that the federal government comes under a lot of scrutiny, but the states maybe not so much. So how significantly do you think that collaboration will help if it happens? Because a number of people will say that collaboration between the federal and state governments aren't significant. Consequently, they slow down in development.
Yeah, I think you are very right to say that issues around maybe basic education belong more to the states and local government than the federal government. And that's why you have this Universal Basic Education Fund, as well as even the committees in the National Assembly that should exercise oversight over the application and management of that fund. But if you look at it properly, the federal government is budgeting about 28 trillion. If you add the budgets of all the other 36 states and FCT combined, you get about 46 or 47, not up to 50. So the bulk of the money is still with the federal government. So I think that we may need to begin to put more searchlight on the state and local government level, because they also manage critical resources and are closer to the people. And their failure somehow is what blows up in this big picture of 20-point-something million out of school children. But we do not also need to compound the problem at the federal level by saying school feeding. You know, we are all in Nigeria. We've heard about persons who claim to be feeding our children when we are all on lockdown, which we know was clearly a lie. There's no need to not to call out that honorable minister that served them and the other people. So there is no clear, transparent mechanism of how even the previous votes, because they're all lumped up most of the times under the service-wide votes, bulk sums of money, 200 million, 300 million, billion. Since Obasanjo days, we have been having that kind of bulk money, SDGs, no disaggregation for you to know. So if they said 300 billion school feeding program, if you want to monitor it, where do you start? How is it disaggregated between the states and local governments? Where is the register of the persons to be fed? In terms of, if I want to see in my state now, can I access any register of the children that are being fed in my state? And maybe I see the ones in my village or my local government too, people I know one-on-one, for me to confirm. So everything is shrouded in secrecy. And that's why I think there should be a policy framework or a legal framework, which comes back to the National Assembly. Put these things in the open. The reason why we've not been having value for money is because there is absence of transparency. So let nobody tell me you are doing school feeding program when all I hear are billions that are spent. I don't know who is being fed. There is no register. You remember even the social register. The governors came to Abuja and discredited it. And yet, money was made available to them for palliatives. They were supposed to now go back and do their own state registers. Which state has come forward to tell us that their register is ready, that we should come and see, and tell us the parameters of how they made it ready? They came to Abuja and said the federal register, they don't want it again. So these are even the federal register that they say World Bank contributed to. Can we begin to have access to it? You can't tell me somebody, you are protecting somebody's privacy. He's too big, but he wants my tax money to be used to be giving him dole out, or even money you borrowed, which you use my tax money to pay it back. So we must have a level of transparency for us to understand where the government is going. Otherwise, most of these things look like stories to some of us, particularly from the point of view that somebody claimed to have fed my children during COVID, and the person knew he or she lied. Nigerians allowed him to walk away with the money, and up till today, nothing has been done.
Well, accountability will certainly continue to be an issue, and I think that that's where the National Assembly comes in, because they also have a role on oversight. So do civil society organizations and the media. But let me quickly take you up on this issue. I mean, also following up on accountability, because you've been talking about bulk money being allocated to certain areas, making it very difficult for anyone to be able to trace or follow what it is that is happening there. This issue of policy coordination, evaluation, and monitoring and delivery unit, which the president has set up, I think is already been headed by Hadiza Usman. How are you optimistic? Because he says in the first 3 months, every quarter, there's going to be an evaluation. Do you think that would also help in the area of governance and accountability?
If properly managed, but I'm afraid every ministry every MDA has planning, research, and statistics, right? And they are supposed to be giving quarterly reports to the Budget Office, Accountant General's Office, from which they will now prepare that budget implementation report to be published at the end of every quarter. So this could also be another layer of bureaucracy. But if it is well managed, because that bureaucracy on its own can only succeed if it is being fed with sufficient information by the MDAs. And the MDAs will have information to provide to you on what they're doing if money is released to them. What I was saying, maybe my colleague here misunderstood me, was that the Budget Office said as at September, we've only released 25% of CAPEX, not what the MDAs have implemented. So the MDAs can only report based on resources made available to them. If the resources are not made available to them, it's garbage in, garbage out. So it is important we have such coordinating mechanism that will be on their neck to remind them to do what they're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, if the resources are not made available to them, there's nothing they can do.
It won't just be about resources. Some people will say it would also be about impact. Yeah,
value for money.
Value for money, and how it is affecting Nigerians. If we say, for instance, we allocate certain amounts of money to the health sector, it won't just be about building hospitals. It will be about whether doctors are there, are they attending to patients, how many patients have been attended. That's the kind of thing I would imagine the Nigerians would want to see. You know, if drugs have been purchased, if people are able to access the drugs, etc., etc. But for you, I mean, I do not know whether you think that this extra level of accountability will be important for ministers.
It may be necessary if the government is serious to make it work. I agree with you, because even if you look at the health budget, some of these budgets, you have very huge sums of money, 15, 20 billion, one line item, no details. So the only person who can effectively monitor and report on that is the author of that budget line. Are those who wrote the budget line, and they know what it is in their mind. Because when you have those kind of money, they say project type funds, and it's just one or two lines, there's no way you, who is an outsider, can know exactly what is happening. For instance, even the Ministry of Health, in previous years, they were not drawing down their full budget, capital budget. Meanwhile, we are busy in civil society calling to say, oh, increase their vote, increase their vote. So some voices are beginning to say, it is more about the absorptive capacity of the ministry. It's more about value for money. We had reports from global funds that drugs brought into the country were expiring at the central stores in Abuja and Lagos. These drugs were supposed to move from Abuja or Lagos to the zonal store in Enugu or Kaduna. From Enugu, it moves to the zone 5 southeast states. From the capitals, it moves to local governments. Drugs worth billions were expiring. At the time, these drugs were needed by maternal and child care across the federation. So there are efficiency issues, there are value for money issues, there are resource issues. So I think if we are serious, we can hold every sector, accountable to what they are doing with the little resources available to them before we begin to call for more. I'm particular about the health sector. We can get more mileage out of that sector, the little resources, than we are doing. For instance, today, the National Assembly has passed a law, and Mr. President has assented to it. He said health insurance is compulsory. Now, what are we doing with that National Health Insurance Authority Act? If you implement that law to the letter, for instance, this year about 1.3 trillion is going to health, you are going to raise premiums, insurance premiums of not less than 3 trillion a year. So the source of money, the pie available for health will increase beyond public resources. So if you get 1.3, 1.5 million from the Treasury, Federal Treasury, you get 3 trillion from insurance premiums, you get money from states. So you could possibly have up to 7 to 10 trillion available for healthcare. You use it to reduce out-of-pocket expenditure, because now we are one of the highest in the world, 72%. And that's why I'm talking about results. He's saying we are not writing literature, we shouldn't write these things. You could have support documents which people could see, which says this is this money. And this is out-of-pocket expenditure. This is where we are going. Otherwise, if you leave it hanging, it will be difficult. It may not necessarily be there in the budget, but there may be result-based documentation available MDA by MDA, available to the public, not just known by the minister, his PAMSEC and directors. It's not their money. Nigerians ought to follow what is happening.
Indeed. Yes. So let me quickly come to you, Honorable. I mean, resources, I know you want to respond to that, and you can add your response to that, but let me ask you, take you up on resources, because that's one area Ms. Onyekwe has raised, issues. The fact that ways and means is still being explored, even though it does appear that we've exhausted the window for that. Crude oil prices, yes, they've been stable for quite a while. It's uncertain whether they're going to remain as bullish as they've been in the past year. 2023 was pretty good with crude oil prices. Crude oil is still the major source of funding for Nigeria's budget. How optimistic are you, looking at how much it is that we've earmarked, to spend this year, that we will be able to meet the revenue aspects of our budget?
Well, you see, before the budget document came in the Parliament, the House of Representatives had unveiled what we call the legislative agenda of the current House, called the People's House. And then one of the cardinal objectives of that legislative agenda is this issue of accountability and transparency in governance. We we as a parliament are working very, very hard. And again, before the budget came, before the budget defense commenced, we made it very clear to the MDAs that, see, whatever money you are given, for whatever purpose, we want to see it translate into realities as much as possible. And in doing that, when I mentioned the issue of budget lines, of course, just budget titles. But when they came for the budget defense, we went into the details. How do you intend to spend this money? And they told us. And the committees are taking notice of some of these things, not explaining details as a document. And the committee is going to be there, to continue to supervise and oversight the agencies in the implementation of this document. And that's why sometimes when people say, you are providing vehicles for members of the National Assembly, is a bit of luxury. And I was wondering how I would have been able to make it from my village in Upper Aguila, on Friday to Abuja. I had to travel throughout the night, to be here. You understand?
Are you justifying the vehicle that was bought?
No, but
they didn't have vehicles before they contested? Or is it a must that they must buy vehicles for you to do the job?
Well, there is also nothing wrong if parliamentarians are given vehicles to ease their job, because so much is being expected of us. You expect us to oversight all the MDs. You expect us to supervise and ensure that monies allocated to them are, duties are carried out in line with this money. You expect legislators to travel, at night and visit. Like, for instance, our Committee on Works, during their visit to some of the roads that are under construction, in time past, the committees will inform the contractors that you are coming, to supervise them. But what we do this time, which is quite different from time past, is that you don't even inform the MDAs that you are coming. Of course, if I tell you today that I'm coming to visit your house to check your books, you're definitely going to get prepared. And once you come, literatures are read out and, with the ceremonies. But what we do now is, to take them unawares. And that's exactly what we are going to be doing in terms of ensuring accountability and transparency in the implementation of the 2024 budget. Again, another thing that is very critical and important from the executive is the quality of personnel, that are being saddled with the responsibilities to manage these funds. In time past, we have seen a high level of incompetence on the part of certain individuals who were just given positions because of their proximity to power.
What did the National Assembly do about it?
Yeah, you see, time past, we raised, the Parliament raised issues which, of course, I think...
Have you noticed anyone in this government?
No, basically, for instance, during the early part of the lifespan of the Parliament, we invited, you saw our investigations, the one being carried out on a job racketeering, oil theft, and all of that. We've invited actors, we've asked people to come and report, explain their actions to us. And the recommendations have been written, reports have been received by the Parliament. And if some of these reports are that heads of these agencies be removed, of course, we're going to pass it to Mr. President. I would believe that with the current level of collaboration and partnership...
So the Assembly has not seen anyone who you fit into what you describe as incompetent in this government?
No, you see, committee reports that are submitted to the House, if not until they are unveiled in the wisdom of the Parliament,
so take it that the answer is
responsibility. No, I cannot come to TV to say this is the report. It is against our laws in the Parliament.
One critical thing I think I need to point out to Honorable is about the security sector. We've been throwing so much money on that sector, but we haven't been getting sufficient results commensurate with the amount of money we've thrown on them. It's not about buying a new jet or buying a new armored car or something. Just take the example of the last brutal massacre in Jos, in Plateau State. The fact that people reported that while this massacre was going on, there were 36 distress calls to the task force. This task force, they have army, they have navy, they have police, they have all kinds. And nobody responded over a space of 48 hours. 48 hours. Over 36 distress calls. We acknowledged and started explaining. Even our young boys these days say, I'm going to explain tired because I can't fathom what explanation. Over 100 persons moved, either in vehicles or motorcycles or by horse or whatever, and cross places where there were checkpoints every 100 or 200 meters. And after the killings, those people have become spirits. They vanished into thin air. This is not the first time. It may not be the last. There's no prosecutions, there is no arrest. So this is beyond money, sir. Your committee needs to know who got these distress calls and refused. He should be fired. He's got no business standing there for 200 lives to be wasted. I'm not saying whoever he is. You call yourself a general and you cannot respond. Who is there in charge of the DSS that allowed this failure of intelligence to happen? And if you talk about it, says it's security, you don't know anything. It is not about knowing anything. It is clear. Whoever did not get this intelligence has no business continuing on my tax money. He should be fired. He should be dismissed. This is clear. People should be prosecuted. We can't continue tolerating excuses. We're enough of these excuses.
You see,
they don't need this money.
That is exactly our position in the parliament, that whoever is given the responsibility and lacks the capacity to deliver, should not be in that position, spending taxpayers' money. But again, exactly what he has said is what I would have said 6 months ago, when I was still in the civil society.
What has changed? You're in the assembly now.
No, it's not because I'm in the assembly. It is because I now understand better. It is one thing to read a chapter of a book. It's another thing to read 2 chapters of that book.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what it
means,
this
context?
Yes, what it means in this context is that, yes, good and fine. We don't want any life loss as far as our country is concerned. In fact, as servants of humanity. Again, we must also understand that the armed forces, the military, these people who have been saddled with the responsibility of command and control are equally not sleeping totally the way we used to think. Yeah, because today, if you do not know how many attacks the armed forces have been able to save us of.
Yeah, but also, I think it's a straightforward call from who received the call?
Yeah, it is important, and I believe that Parliament...
What other explanation do we need on that?
No. You must ask questions. Because it is one thing for someone to say, we made 48 calls within 30 minutes. It's another thing for an inquiry, a proper inquiry. He is a lawyer. He knows that you can't listen to one party to just pass a judgment. You must listen to both parties. So our committee in the House will definitely invite, people from the community and invite the leadership of the armed forces to come and speak to us. Remember, not quite long, we had a sectorial debate, and the first group of persons to be invited was the chief of defense.
Well, we'll see what the National Assembly does about this case.
No,
because if it's out there that people receive calls.
No, definitely. Currently, we are investigating, the bomb attack in the misplaced bomb, drop in Kaduna, the killings that took place in that place, and everywhere we're interested. Even this 10th assembly, if there's any assembly that has considered more motions on this issue of security in Nigeria, I think within the last 6 months of
we'll watch and
we've
see.
Done more than any other
parliament. We'll see if the assembly will put their money where their mouth is. After all, you all have your vehicles now, so there will be no excuse.
It's not about vehicle.
No, you said there has to be a vehicle from Abuja to.
What the vehicles the vehicles do for us today is that if I need to travel from here to Moguno,
what we understand is you have to get results to the people.
No, there must be a parliament.
Bottom line,
a parliament that sat on a Saturday, to consider budget. Because we know that from 1st of January, from today, Nigerians
we need to wrap up at this point.
To move their life.
We'll look to see what will happen to this one. If it will not be business as usual.
It cannot be business as usual with the 10th Parliament. Okay,
we'll see. I think the 9th Assembly said the same thing too. But this one, we'll wait. And see what happens.
No. You see, it's not about what they said.
Honorable Philip Agbese is Deputy Chairman, House Committee on Media and Public Affairs. We've also had Eze Onyekwe, who's a legal practitioner, as well as the lead director, Center for Social Justice. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on, and a Happy New Year to both of you.
Thank you so much.
And Happy New Year.